Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. We already see a large number of people joining at the dot. So without further ado, I think we will get started. Thank you so much for joining. It is an absolute pleasure for me to welcome you to this version of the UNEP Digital Discovery Series on the UN Biodiversity Lab. My name is Pooja. I am the head of web at UNEP and also a key part of the Digital Transformation Task Force. And I am absolutely delighted to be your facilitator today. We've been great fans, and as this product has developed, and it's a great way to dive in and kick off this session. If we could please go to the next slide, please. So before we get started, I think it's great to highlight some of the key logistical points for our session together. If you have any technical issues, do send a private Zoom message to Marjorie, who is active in the chat. If you would like, you can also send her a message to the WhatsApp number. Let's try to refrain from the group chat if possible. Your microphones will be muted during the plenary sessions, and this will really ensure that our speakers can be heard loud and clear. If you do have a question, you have two options. One is please type in your question in the Zoom box, or you could also virtually raise your hand in the control panel when we pause for questions. We will open up the microphone for you during that moment. And do introduce yourselves on the chat. We'd love to know where you're from, what your name is, what position you're currently holding, your institution, and let us know what your favorite natural area is in your country or in the world. So with that in mind, let's move over to slide 3. So for objectives of the session, today it is really about driving awareness of the power of geospatial data for environmental planning, monitoring, and reporting. And ultimately, it is really to strengthen the capacity of UN system staff to use this kind of data for action on biodiversity, climate, and sustainable development. And lastly, and importantly, is really to promote the UN Biodiversity Lab as a tool to support the use of geospatial data across the agencies and across stakeholder groups. Next slide, please. So today, in terms of the agenda, what we're going to be covering is, at first, we'll hand over the floor to Coralie Pretorius, who is going to be setting the context for the UN Common Approach on Biodiversity, really the big strategy picture. Then we will be pausing for a quick question or two. We'll then move on to the introduction to the platform itself, and here Lauren Weatherden of UNEP WCMC will be presenting the platform to us. Oscar Mcdermott will be sharing the data on the UN Biodiversity Lab, and then we'll look into the training part of it from Dijang. So with that in mind, before we get in, I think we'd just like to give you a quick couple of polls. Marjorie, if you are there, please, if you would want to, there you go, she's on it. Do let us know, what sector do you represent? So we have UN Intergovernmental really topping the charts at the moment. We have some from academia, NGOs, and some from governments. And it's really great to see this multi-stakeholder participation. All right, so we have about 75% of our audience today have voted. So let's maybe move over to question 2. Question 2, here we go. What potential application of spatial data is most interesting or relevant for your work? You see the choices: create a biodiversity baseline, develop a spatialized action plan, and many others. So we're definitely seeing monitor the impact of project interventions quite high up there, but creating a biodiversity baseline is indeed up there as well, along with developing a spatialized action plan that shows where to implement interventions. All right. So we've seen that 66% of this audience participated in that question, which is fantastic. So with that, we can now turn it over to our first presenter. I would like to hand it over to Corley Pretorius, who is the Deputy Director at UNEP WCMC. Corley, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pooja, and a very warm welcome to everyone. It's great to see you online, and thank you also for participating in the polls and announcing yourself in the chat. It's great to see the diversity and geographic diversity of everyone participating today. I wanted to just give a little bit of a scene setter and overview of some of the context for the application of the UN Biodiversity Lab. And what I would like to talk about is the UN's efforts to work together around biodiversity. And why do we want to do that? Well, for the last few years now, we've been trying to get to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And we hope that 2022 will finally be the super year that we've been working towards. In the context of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, we really need action across the entire society. So it's not only government's role to take responsibility for biodiversity, but we need multi-stakeholder partnerships, beyond engagement, beyond the environment ministries, a sort of a whole of government approach or all sector, cross-sectoral approach to biodiversity. And the reason why we need this is if we want to halt the loss of biodiversity and reverse the loss of biodiversity, we need to tackle the key drivers of biodiversity loss: land use change, over-exploitation, pollution, climate change. We need to restore nature, especially looking at the contributions of nature to people. We need to make sure that the investments in finance is taking place. Fundamentally, basically, we need to have a different relationship with nature and integrate it in our business, our economic and our financial decision-making, in our consumption decision-making as well. Next slide, please. Thus, in 2020, in the original super year for nature, the Secretary General called on the UN system through the mechanism, the coordination mechanism called the CEB, the Chiefs Executives Board for Coordination, that brings together the heads of all agencies across the UN system to work together on biodiversity. And what we developed through a process, one of the CEB subsidiaries, to be technical about interagency coordination mechanisms, through the high-level committee on programs, we developed a common approach for the UN. And it's really supporting or responding to that rallying call of the SG in his State of the Planet address on making peace with nature. What we've done with the common approach is to really articulate the commitment of the UN system to work together to support member states, support governments, but also work with the private sector and work with civil society to implement the global biodiversity framework when that is agreed, and support the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and, of course, climate action under the Paris Agreement. The beauty of working on nature and working on the nature agenda is that the benefits reach well beyond the environment only. It is also responding to peace and security concerns. There's a big role for human rights, and especially the right to a healthy environment, and it underpins our economic development. On the next slide, maybe colleagues, if you can mute during the presentation, you'll get a chance for questions later on. I quickly want to give you an overview on the structure of how we work together across all of these UN agencies to decide on how will we structure our collaboration, our collective action. We designed 3 impact areas, one around human rights, peaceful societies, and planetary stability. And there are 5 medium-term objectives associated with them. Then there's a second impact area around the green and inclusive economic requirement, looking at public and private financial flows, sustainable lifestyles, food systems, very important, sustainable production. And the third area of collaboration across the UN system is to support institutions, accountability, and justice. And making data and communication technologies, digital transformation is very much part of delivering on this objective. In the next slide, I'll just give a quick snapshot of how we as the UN system can work together at different levels, at the global level, regional and national level, to drive implementation of the internationally agreed environmental goals, as we call it, biodiversity targets, commitments, but just make sure that nature and biodiversity is integrated in decisions. The national level implementation is the focus of today's seminar. And we really would like to demonstrate how you can use biodiversity data to further strategic planning. They were in the polls, needs identified around spatial prioritization, setting baselines, and so forth. So I'll stop here and hand it over for the real thing, for the presentation on the Biodiversity Lab. Thank you.
Thanks, Coralie. I am wondering if there are any questions in the chat box. Would you like to pose some questions? And this is a question for our audience. And while we're waiting for them, I'd like to pose a question to you, Coralie. What do you see as the role of the UN system to support countries to use platforms such as the UN Biodiversity Lab?
We are here to support countries, and not only government institutions. When we talk about countries, is multi-stakeholders in national context and subnational jurisdictions as well. So whether you are organized around in a urban setting, in a local government setting, or you organize around a watershed, or you would like to protect a particular coastal areas, what the UN system can do is to facilitate that discussion and to bring stakeholders together. And this is really our role as a facilitator and helping to provide the data, helping to inform the discussion, but also helping to mediate solutions. What we would like to move away from, or what we want to ensure, is that the benefits that nature provides are also equally distributed to different communities and to people across societies. So I think that's another important role, that facilitation, mediation, that we can provide technical support, but then also helping to bring the data together and other expertise to these discussions.
Thanks so much, Coralie. Well, now let's give the floor to Lauren Weatherden, Senior Program Officer, Digital Transformation at UNEP WCMC, and she's going to provide us with a little bit of an introduction to the lab, to the UN Biodiversity Lab platform. Lauren, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Pooja, and hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Pooja said, my name is Lauren Weatherden, and I'm a Senior Program Officer in the Digital Transformation team at UNEP WCMC. It is my pleasure today to introduce UN Biodiversity Lab on behalf of colleagues. And with that, next slide, please. I'd like to start with the basics. So UN Biodiversity Lab is a free open source platform that provides policymakers and other non-commercial users with access to the best spatial data and analytical tools. It does not require GIS experience to use. Next slide, please. We created a UN Biodiversity Lab just over 3 years ago, originally with the aim to support parties in their commitments to the CBD, specifically with 6 national reporting. And with the launch of the platform, we challenged countries to double the number of their maps between their 5th and 6th national reports. And I'm very pleased to say that they succeeded. Following the completion of that cycle, we then fully re-envisioned UN Biodiversity Lab based on the feedback from users that we'd received to provide a wider range of functionalities to support planning, implementation, and monitoring of the emerging post-2020 global biodiversity framework. In October last year, we launched the updated version of UN Biodiversity Lab, which we're very excited to share with you today. And with that, I'd like to ask Andrew if he can help to play the trailer. From the streets of New York City to the heart of the Amazon, maps help us understand how our changing planet is affecting our lives. Maps help us see where nature is thriving and where it is being destroyed. Spatial data help decision makers put nature at the heart of sustainable development by helping them identify essential ecosystems that help us secure water, feed more than 7 billion people, avoid natural disasters, keep carbon in the ground, and sustain more than 2 billion livelihoods. We, at the United Nations, together with our partners, are excited to launch the next iteration of the UN Biodiversity Lab. We have updated the UN Biodiversity Lab with new data and new functions to help decision makers put nature at the heart of development. To access more than 400 cutting-edge global data sets, including the world's first 10-meter resolution land cover and land use map. To explore popular data collections that unlock the power of data on key thematic issues and that provide insights on how and where action is needed most. To create a secure workspace where you can upload your own data to generate your own insights on the intersection of nature, climate, and sustainable development. To calculate dynamic indicators such as deforestation, showing the state of the planet at the click of a button. To generate your own powerful maps that can guide local and national action for nature, climate, and sustainable development. Powered by Microsoft's planetary computer and supported by more than 30 data providers, the UN Biodiversity Lab provides novel insight that is essential for putting nature at the heart of sustainable development. Our goal is to enable everyone to harness the power of data, to equip policymakers with powerful tools to make more informed decisions on nature, and to be able to monitor the pulse of our planet. Join us. Start exploring today at unbiodiversitylab.org. Excellent. So hopefully that trailer provided an overview of some of the functionalities, or just a glimpse of some of the functionalities that are available through UN Biodiversity Lab. And with the remainder of the time, I'd like to just touch on a couple of the highlights of what's changed with the recent version. So next slide, please. At the center of our redesign, we were really trying to focus on making UN Biodiversity Lab more user-friendly and intuitive so that anyone can easily use the platform. And to do this, we improved the design, and we also made the platform available in 5 languages. We also recognize that increasingly being able to share data across and between platforms is crucial to help strengthen interoperability. And so to do this, we've built in the ability to be able to share data and to receive data from other platforms via APIs, for instance. In our redesign, we also sought to enhance some of the functionalities that were really part of that core offering, and to provide new functionalities based on some of the user requests. So you can see that the full list of updated and new features is available on this slide, many of which were covered in the trailer. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go into all the details today, but we're definitely very happy to discuss this more in the Q&A. And I think the next slide provides a bit of a visualization of some of the 6 key features that come to mind. So with that, I mean, we've thrown a lot at you, and what we'd like to do is take a bit of a step back and pause and to ask for your feedback. And so I believe my colleague Marjorie is going to help with a Zoom poll. We'd love to ask which features of UN Biodiversity Lab you feel are most relevant to you. You can choose multiple features. We would welcome feedback on that front. And this is extremely useful for us to be able to guide our development of the platform to ensure it meets those needs. And so I can see the comments coming in swiftly, which is great. Give everyone a moment to add in their responses. maybe just a few more seconds. I can see we can get about, maybe we get to 150. Excellent. That's great. Unless there is anyone that's super eager to, there we go. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. I think what I always appreciate about the answer to these questions is the breadth of uses, and I think we'll probably come back to that, but whether that's accessing the global layers themselves, but also then application in the context of dynamic metrics for at the country by country level. And I think the secure workspaces in particular, from my perspective, are really a key functionality that I know there's been a breadth of different applications. So brilliant. With that, I will just use the remainder of my time to highlight 3 easy ways that you can get involved in UN Biodiversity Lab today. The first is that you can sign up for our mailing list. So please feel free to drop your email in the chat and we'll add you. Secondly, you can sign up for an account to access some of the features that we've discussed, although you can explore the website as well. And again, we can add you to that. And finally, please do contact us if you'd like to create your own UNBL secure workspace. So Dee's email is there. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much for your attention and to turn it back over to Pooja.
Thank you, Lauren. That was impressive and super exciting. We'd love to pose for a couple of questions. First, of course, let us see if Oliver is still here with us. Oliver Hillel, if you are around and if you would like to still ask your questions, may I please ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Ray Go, my colleague from the Secretariat, is with us too. So we're here representing the UNEP Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and it's thrilling to be here. I was just going to say how timely this conversation is, and I was going to say one of the I was passionately sharing that in the chat. We have a 10-year plan. The global framework coming up for negotiations as we speak. It's later on in Geneva. Many of you may be involved in this discussion. This is 10 years. At the same time, in the UN General Assembly this year, SDGs 14 on oceans and 15 on biodiversity on land are being exactly revised for a good reason. The indicators for target 15 are coming under review. Now, can the Biodiversity Lab help in that? This, to me, is not only obvious, it is necessary. We need to make sure. So my passionate suggestion here is that our main target in this should be the national governments. They turn the UN around, they make us work. And I think if we can make the Biodiversity Lab be useful to the national governments who are trying to develop integrated finance, development, planning, everything plans, not just biodiversity, the mainstreaming of it across. The way we see mainstreaming goes across all areas of governance and, of course, all sectors, but also across all levels of governance and also across several stakeholders. We need to effectively involve the finance sector, the business sector, the multilateral banks. So I see the lab, the biggest challenge for the lab is to be useful to the crucial transformative actor here, which is the national government officer or agent that is responsible for those integrated plans. And I would love this platform to help them, because then it would help the global framework as well as all the other multilateral environmental agreements, because we all heard that we need an integrated approach. And Pooja, I think the lab can help develop this integrated approach. Thanks.
Thank you, Oliver. And let me pass it on to one of our panelists who may want to respond to that question. Corley, Lauren, would you like to respond?
Maybe I can just quickly chip in just to say thank you so much, Oliver. I was typing thank you so much in the chat. It is, we share the urgency and the need to engage governments. I think there are so many areas that we can expand the application and the work and further inputs, looking at greater transparency, more monitoring at the national level. But it's not only about getting the data together. What we also want to drive is action on the ground. And this is really the important part. So with the 10-year framework coming up, the monitoring is incredibly important. Understanding what's happening on the ground is incredibly important, but we need to take action. We need to drive implementation of this global biodiversity framework. This is where our shortcomings or our failures of the past is that we haven't been able to come together. We haven't been able to support each other to drive implementation. And we hope that the Biodiversity Lab can be one of the tools that can bring people together around these sort of joint prioritization, looking at landscapes, looking at seascapes, and looking at the intervention strategies and the priorities that we as a collective can take to on the nature agenda.
Thank you, Corley. We have lots of questions coming in, but I see Elizabeth Tamayo Tabares probably jumped on Oliver's question and asked, do you envision any use by the financial sector specifically? Would either of you like to pick that one up?
Yes, that is a fantastic question, and it's quite a tricky one. So if you forgive me for delving into a little bit the technical details of the back office of the Biodiversity Lab, at the moment, we have the data available for non-commercial use purposes. So that's what we really want to do, is that we drive government support, as I said, multi-stakeholder processes, not for profit processes. This is the conditions of use of the data. The use of biodiversity data and ecosystem data by the financial sector is incredibly important. It is going to be much more important in the next few years, as soon as the task force on nature-related financial disclosure starts to develop its framework. We're working at 120, 150% to look at what's the kind of indicators and metrics that the financial sector can use to understand their nature-related risk. So this work is underway. And in parallel, we're really trying to figure out how can we make a core set of data, biodiversity-related species data available in an open way, so we can lift some of the commercial use restrictions that we currently have on the data. So what that will require is working closely with the data providers, the scientific organizations, the observatories that are pulling the data together. So we need to work with them. We need to look at conditions of use. We need to make sure that the data is provided over the duration of at least this 10-year framework so that people can track their action. And the most important thing is we need to ensure that there's investment in the data, and investment money flows to those data providers so that they can provide us with the data in a sustainable way. So these are all the pieces that we are looking at the moment to bring together. But I'm afraid to say that they are not coming together in a seamless way yet. But we hope to really have some progress over the next 18 months, 2 years, to bring this system together so that all actors in society, and the role of the financial sector is incredibly important, can use biodiversity data to inform their decisions.
Thanks, Corley. Yes, data and open access is such a complex world. So yeah, and it's great that the platform is leading the way in terms of that. Another more question coming: what is the relationship between the UN Biodiversity Lab and the other digital tools on biodiversity? For example, the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool. And this question is, I hope I'm saying this name right, Malgorzata Stilo. So who would like to pick this question up, please?
I can. I see Corley's unmuting as well. I can perhaps touch on it and then Corley can build. I think one key message here is that at the center of many of these tools is the same shared data. So we do have some core biodiversity knowledge data sets that feed into these tools, and then the tools themselves are then tailored to the needs of different users. So I think in that context with IBAT, it is very much tailored towards supporting the private sector with very specific goals that they have on the ground in terms of, and also with screening. I think with the Corley very eloquently described some of the challenges, but also the opportunities with regards to UN Biodiversity Lab. And I think from my perspective here, the opportunity is very much around this interoperability with other tools, with core data sources and products. So it's about creating this digital ecosystem rather than a one-size-fits-all product. So hopefully that provides a little bit of the context that, you know, the data that feed into these things, ultimately, we're wanting to ensure that those are supported, they have that sustainability, and they're able to then be interpreted or packaged in a way that's useful for the different users for that key impact that we are talking about on the ground.
Thank you, Lauren. That was really helpful. All
Can
right.
I posted a response to Malgozata's question in the chat also, but just to explain in 2 minutes quickly. So IBAT is a tool that we've developed it's been going for a large number of years at the moment, but it has additional sort of pre-formatted algorithms, reporting formats, and it helps companies or organizations that are applying for finance to fulfill some of the reporting and the screening requirements. So it was specifically designed, for example, to draw up a report using biodiversity data to respond to the IFC's Performance Standard 6 on biodiversity. It also helps companies to report on their GRI reporting. So it has particular sort of algorithms pre-programmed, and the users basically use that as on a subscription basis, and they can fulfill these requirements. So it's a little bit, it has a very specialized, as Lauren said, target audience, specifically helping with corporate responsibility on biodiversity.
Thanks for jumping in, Corley. All right. So now that we've set the scene and introduced the basics, let's turn over to the training elements, which is, and it gets only more exciting. So our next two presenters will take us a little deeper to explore some of the data, so you can take a virtual tour, and they will be introducing to you the tools of the platform. So first up, we have Oscar Mcdermott. He is the Senior Data Scientist at UNEP WCMC. Oscar, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Pooja. Good afternoon, everyone from a dreary and grey Cambridge. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to everyone today. As Pooja mentioned, my name is Oscar Mcdermott, and I'm a Senior Data Scientist at UNEP WCMC. And in my previous life, I have been Data Manager there for the last 2 years. Today, I get the pleasure of sharing with you a little bit more about our UN Biodiversity platform, and I'm going to briefly run through and highlight a variety of data it hosts. I want to run through it looking at kind of categories of data it hosts, and it would be remiss of me, being from UNEP WCMC, not to start with protected areas data. Next slide, please. So the first data set that I want to speak about briefly is the World Database on Protected Areas. The WDPA is the largest database of protected areas on the planet. The data included are the legally defined protected area borders as reported by governments for both marine and terrestrial areas. Just speaking to some of the questions that came up before around APIs, all the protected area data is pulled directly from UNEP WCMC in Cambridge from Protected Planet, so that the data on UN Biodiversity Lab is constantly updated as the WDPA is updated monthly. In addition to this, actually, I believe the OECM dataset is soon to be uploaded onto UN Biodiversity Lab 2. That is the other effective conservation measures dataset. What you now see on your screen is another dataset which was published in 2017 by scientists at the JRC, or the Joint Research Centre in the European Commission, that analysed how well connected protected area state is within ecoregions globally. For those of you that are familiar with this data set, you may know it as the Protected Connected data set, or more likely the POTCON data set. The next category of data that I am going to look at is data on biodiversity. Perhaps I should have started here, given it's the core offering of UN Biodiversity Lab, but I didn't. So next slide, please. Brilliant. To start off, we have the Biodiversity Intactness Index, which shows the modeled average abundance of originally present species in a grid cell as a percentage relative to their abundance in an intact ecosystem. It can be seen basically as a measure of how much humans have impacted on terrestrial biodiversity, or as a measure of how degraded biodiversity is in an area. We also offer recently released data from NASA on forest structural integrity and forest structural condition. These data sets can be used to identify the last of the best tropical forests. It should be noted, however, that they are limited to tropical broadleaf biomes. We also host the KBA dataset, or the key biodiversity areas, which are the most important places in the world for species and their habitats. Faced with the global environmental crisis, we need to focus our collective efforts on conserving the places that matter most. The KBA program supports the identification, mapping, monitoring, and conservation of KBAs to help safeguard the most critical sites for nature on our planet, from rainforests to reefs, mountains to marshes, deserts to grasslands, and to the deepest parts of our oceans. And yes, I was made to say that. Next slide, please. We also include several other products that are derived from the IUCN's Red List species range data that include species richness, which you can see on the slide here, threatened species richness, and metrics of range rarity, basically based on a measure of species endemism. So also critical for drawing connections to SDGs are assessments of ecosystem services such as carbon storage and sequestration. And so to that end, we include several recently available data sets on carbon, including above and below ground biomass carbon, which provides temporally consistent and harmonized global maps of above and below ground carbon biomass density for the year 2010 at a 300-meter spatial resolution. We also host the global soil organic carbon layer, which allows the estimation of soil organic carbon stock from 0 to 30 centimeters. It represents a key contribution to SDG indicator 15.3.1, which defines the area of degraded land. Another category of data that we host on UN Biodiversity Lab is the ecosystems and land cover data. And as was briefly highlighted in the introduction video that Lauren previously showed, next slide, please. We are currently hosting the Esri 10-meter land cover data set, which displays a global map of land use and land cover at 10-meter resolution. This data is derived from ESA Sentinel-2 imagery. Next slide, please. We, of course, also include terrestrial ecoregions of the world. Just to note that the version you're seeing on your screen is the 2017 updated version. And for those of you working on the Convention on Biological Diversity, this is one of the key data that are directly referred to in specific biodiversity target protection commitments. We also have the World Ecosystems data. At 250 meters global resolution, these data are able to show ecologically meaning differentiation between habitat types by accounting for a range of ecophysiographic variables such as precipitation, landform type, soil type, etc., etc. And we can see on the screen here the difference in these multivariable data sets with the ecoregions in black lines for Uganda, which is pretty cool. So moving on, we also have a category of data that we call the socioeconomic and human well-being data. This category includes data on human development as well as ecosystem services, which play a critical role in linking nature and sustainable development. So the first data set that I want to highlight in this category is that of the city water maps, which contains information on water sources for 534 cities internationally. The watershed layer, as seen on the slide here, includes information about catchment area of the watershed that supplies these cities. We also have the crop suitability layer from 2011 to 2100, and it shows general agricultural suitability and irrigation on currently irrigated land. So it covers 2 time periods, this data set, 2011 to 2040 and 2071 to 2100. It also shows changes in agricultural suitability over 2 periods, 1981 to 2100 and 2011 to 2100. As well as that, we have the gridded livestock of the world, which is the global distribution of chickens, ducks, horses, goats, sheep, pigs, cattle, and buffalo in 2010, which is expressed as a total number of animals per pixel. And many of you may know this layer as well, which is the human footprints layer, which basically looks at a global cumulative measure of human pressures on the landscape. We also have what is known as the Realized Clean Water Provision dataset provided by NatureMap, which consists of a globally normalized map from 0 to 1 of pixels ranked for their relative importance in terms of delivering clean water to downstream beneficiaries. And finally, it's also very important to note that the UN Biodiversity Lab does not just offer datasets that are a snapshot in time, but we also offer, where possible, a time series data. So the first one that I want to highlight in this fashion is the annual tree cover loss. This data set shows global forest change. Forest loss can be defined as stand replacement or disturbance, or a change from a forest to a non-forest state. And the data set is updated to the year 2020 currently in UN Biodiversity Lab. We also include the MODIS data sets, such as NASA's MODIS Derived Enhanced Vegetation Index, the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, Net Primary Production, and Gross Primary Production. These data sets are all updated to 2020. And as you can see on the screen now, you can just select what year is relevant to your choice. But I have just presented to you a very short summary of some of the data sets that are available. As Lauren mentioned, we have over 150 data sets available in UN Biodiversity Lab, which are made up of over 400 different data layers. So to be able to see the full list of data available on UN Biodiversity Lab, please follow the link that you can see on the screen now. And with that, you've heard enough of me, and I'll hand you back over to Pooja. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. That was fascinating. All right, so let us take a couple of questions for this segment before we move on. The first question comes from Olusola Olani. And the question is, are there any available data sets for production of maps of geological mineral exploration and mining on the UNBL?
That's quite a specific question in terms of what data is on there, but off the top of my head, I'm not going to answer definitively and say yes, but please go and have a look at the website and the actual the list of data that's available on there in the last slide that I showed. But I think I'm not aware off the top of my head, but absolutely we're always looking for new sources of information. So if there are data sets that you are aware of that you would like on UN Biodiversity Lab, please submit them to us for consideration to be included in future iterations of UN Biodiversity Lab.
Well, there you go. Do get on the platform and look at the range of data sets. Oscar, you just showed us a bunch. So next question from Katalin Pep. I used to work with the free data of usgs.gov, but now one can analyze spatial data on the UNBL as well. Do you provide the same quality of data?
So I think the easiest response to say is yes here. So first of all, we're always linking back to the source of the data. So we are as high quality as the provider of a data set. Not only that, but we are always doing our best to ensure quality of data sets that come into UN Biodiversity Lab. We have a set of criteria which we try and assess the data within UN Biodiversity Lab against. We assess against things like the terms of use of the data set, the availability, the frequency of update, its temporality, what's its geographic coverage, what transparency is there around that data set, its geographic scale, scalability, and how authoritative is the data set. So has it been through peer review, et cetera, et cetera. So we're always trying to ensure high quality where possible.
Thank you so much, Oscar. Certainly a lot of data rigor going on there. All right, so why don't we move on? Our final section will give you an introduction to how to use the UNBL public platform. So now I'd like to give the floor over to Di Zhang, who is a spatial planning analyst for UNDP. Di, over to you.
Thank you, Pooja. Hi, everyone. I'm Di Zhang. I'm a spatial planning analyst with UNDP. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Frankly speaking, I've never seen these many hundreds of people in the same Zoom meeting. Thank you so much for coming. In the earlier sessions, Lauren and Oscar have given excellent introductions of the core features and the global datasets available on the UN Biodiversity Lab. Here in this session, we want to guide you more on how to use the public platform and the spatial data there. I'm already seeing a lot of questions on some specific functionalities, and hopefully after today's training, this platform can start contributing to your projects and your research. We have designed today's training to cover the main elements you may use, starting from registration and login to viewing and downloading the data sets. And then we have a hands-on exercise for you to visit the platform by yourself. During my presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or send your questions to the chat. We'll make sure to save a few minutes for Q&As later on. All right, now let's get started. Here on this slide, you can see the homepage for the UN Biodiversity Lab, accessible at the above address, www.unbiodiversitylab.org. We currently offer 5 different languages: English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian. You can select the language you prefer from this drop-down menu. And once all set, click on the data tab in the middle of the control bar here to enter the public platform. In the public platform, on the top right corner, you can also see a language menu here in case you want to switch the language. And now let's look at the account icon at the top right corner. You will see a sign in option. Currently, I'm not signed in this page. And what I can access here is to view the public platform data. While creating a UNBL account definitely gives you greater access to the data and some customizable functionalities. In particular, registered users are able to clip and download the datasets from their areas of interest. So to sign up, it's simple. You just need to fill in some basic register information and then click sign up. In a few minutes, you will receive an email for you to verify your account. After that, you will be able to log into the public platform and manage your profile. As you can notice, now my left bar looks different. I can now access all the workspaces I join in, and I can also create my own places collections. So in short, it's very simple to sign up, and we encourage you all to do that. And once you have registered, you can search and visualize the data in a few easy steps. Now let's explore how to search the global data, how to visualize it, and customize your map view. All the data can either be accessed globally or viewed for a specific country or place. For this example, we'll stay at the global level. First, click on the layers icon here on the left panel to see a full list of layers available. If you know the name of the layer you're looking for, just type the title or the keywords in the search box. For example, I'm typing forest here, and all the layers with forest in its title popped up. Alternatively, you can expand the filters to select your subject of interest. For example, if you want to explore all the layers related to biodiversity, just click on this biodiversity filter to view all the options there. And to load a layer on the map, click on the toggle bar to the right of the layer name, and then the layer will show up. Click on the toggle again if you want to remove it. Sometimes we want to activate multiple layers to the map at the same time to compare or conduct overlay analysis. Here we offer these little tools for you to adjust their overlay orders and opacity. For example, I now added both forest loss layer and WDPA layer to view the forest loss happened within protected areas. And I can click on the dot icon here to move the forest loss layer to the top and then adjust its opacity to about 60, so it won't completely hide the boundary of the protected areas beneath. And besides that, there's a little eye-shaped icon that you can temporarily hide the layer from the map. And of course, a cross mark to remove the layer from your map view. And then we also have several options for you to customize the base map. First, you can toggle on or off the labels, which shows the name of the places. Second, you can also toggle on or off the roads. For example, I'm currently here in Shanghai, such a dense road web, yet travel jams every day. And last but not least, there are two background options, satellite images and grayscale base map. You can find them all in the map control bar at the bottom left of the screen. Okay, so above is how to activate the global layers and customize your map view on the UN Biodiversity Lab. As introduced earlier, all the data layers can be visualized specifically for your country or any areas of interest. In addition, we offer at-a-glance metrics based on the best available UN-certified global spatial data sets. Shown on this slide, we currently select 8 representative index, including forest, biodiversity, land cover, carbon, human footprint, etc., that can help report on the state and changes of nature for your country. To view and download these statistics, first, you need to select your area of interest. Click on this places icon in the left menu bar. Similar with the searching of layers, you can directly type the name of your country in the search box. Like I type Colombia here, and then the country will pop up. Or use the filters to select any countries, jurisdictions, or cross-boundary areas of your interest. And once you've selected your place of interest, click on it. The map will automatically zoom into that place and calculate these dynamic metrics for you. Try to scroll through to view the summarized data sets, and then you can click Show on Map to activate the spatial layer. There, you can get a better visualization of where these changes occur, the distribution of protected areas in your country, also the cities with highest human footprint, and so on. And if you want to know more about each data set, just click on the information icon here. There you will find a more detailed description of each data set. And also it includes the links to the data source, the citation format, and all the information you may find useful. If you want to download the metrics data on the left panel, click on this arrow button near the information button, and we offer both CSV and JSON format for these summarized statistics. These can be a very useful data source to reference for the country's state of nature. By this point, I hope you all had an overview of how to access the data and calculate dynamic metrics for your country. Finally, let me show you how to share your map view online, produce the maps, and download the spatial data from the UN Biodiversity Lab. Let's begin with sharing a map view. Once you have created a beautiful and informative map, if you want to share with your colleagues or link it in a report while keeping the same places, layer orders, and opacity you've set, all you need to do is to copy the URL displayed in your browser, like what I'm doing now. You can see the URL has already recorded the name of the layers loaded, your opacity settings, and central coordination. And just copy paste this URL. Anyone in the world would able to see the same map view on UNBL, just like your view. Personally, I think this is a really smart design and very useful for data sharing. I've also been using this function a lot. And then you might also want to produce the map from UNBL and use it as a figure in your report or other communication products. In the map view, we already help you set the basic map elements, including a legend, the scale bar, and a north arrow. And we suggest you can use the screenshot function in your laptop or computer with all these elements included to make the map you need. And to add more about the mapping standards, well, try to make it as clear and concise as possible. Also, the important text on the map, like the name of all the layers, should be legible. And it's also necessary to use the correct citations so we can acknowledge the contributions of all our excellent data providers that made our work possible. And speaking more of the citation format, to cite the map properly, first remember to cite all the data sources shown on your map, including all the layers you activated, as well as the UN boundary map in the background. The full citations of each data can be found in the data information page that I showed earlier. And then please also reference that the map is generated on the UN Biodiversity Lab and include our DOI here. Here are some example maps for your reference. If the map is intended to be standalone, you can reference the left example on the slide here. And if the map is to be inserted as a figure in a report or a larger document, you can use the example on the right side of the slide. And all these formatting guidance is on our supporting page and user guidance manual, which we'll share with all of you later. The final part of my training, also an essential function to cover, is how to download the spatial layers. In most cases, you may need the raw data to conduct further analysis. And to do that, we have two options for you. The first option is directly clip and download the layer on UNBL. If you only need the data for a specific country, let's say Colombia, the most convenient way for you is to find the area of interest in the places and then click on these three dots here to clip and export the layers. Once click on it, you will see a drop-down menu with all the layer options. Select the one you need, and then there are two formats, GeoTIFF and PNG format. For geospatial data, please select the GeoTIFF format and then click on download. The layer will just be download in the range of your places of interest. Well, our second option here is for those who might be interested in downloading the full global cover data sets. We have provided the link of the original data provider in the data information page where you can download the entire data sets in the source website. Just like my example here, by clicking on download the data, it will take you to the source page and you will see the entire data sets here. And about this, our training today on the public features of the UN Biodiversity Lab, another powerful function I have to mention is our secure workspaces. We won't have time to go through the training of Workspace today, but I do want to add a few words for those who might be interested. As my colleague Lauren introduced, in the secure workspaces, you can upload and manage your own data and actually customize most of the features I've mentioned today. And there is an introduction page of the workspaces with the guidance on how to apply a workspace with us. I'm gonna ask my dear colleague Marjorie to drop the web page link into the chat now. And I do encourage those who might be interested, please take a look of this page. And if you apply a workspace to us, we'll feedback to you within 1 week. All right, enough of me talking. Now that you have all our knowledge on UN Biodiversity Lab, we want to give the floor back to you for a short exercise. In the next few minutes, please go access the platform by yourself and try to create a map of the world database on protected areas and forest loss in your country. I'm gonna ask my colleague Marjorie again to help drop the platform link into the chat. And everyone who has a computer around you, please join this exercise and let's get started. If you are able to finish the exercise, please give me a thumbs up so I can know you've nailed it. Oh, wow, we already have a champion. All right, and while waiting for more thumbs up, let me give you some more hints. You can follow these steps to make a map of your own. And after you've done so, also, please feel free to share the map URL to the chat and we can all view the map you created together. I see Jessica has a thumbs up. And how about everyone else? Are you able to access the platform and join this exercise? Also, here is a GIF to show you the steps with more visualized guidance. For the forest loss here, I'm selecting the global forest change dataset. The layers within this dataset were grouped together. And in the drop-down menu, you can see their forest loss and forest loss year, which is the year the loss happened. Feel free to use either one of them. And then to load the WDPA data, just type the name in the search box. And after that, feel free to adjust the layers order and customize your view a bit. And then we find our places of interest. Just type the name of your country here in the search box. And I'm using Peru as an example. Once I click it, the map will locate to Peru for me and also calculate these dynamic metrics. And now I have the map I want. And I also want to activate the satellite background here so I can view more clearly on what the land type might be. And then here I got the map I want. I can either copy the URL in my browser to share the map view online or use the screenshot function to share the map as a figure. And I see more thumbs up. Great, and thanks so much for joining the exercise. Gali, Zhao Ying, and Jessica, congratulations on nail this exercise. You're true champions today. Please accept my virtual applause. All right, so that's all about our training and our exercise for today. If you have further questions, please feel free to raise your hand, send it to the chat, or email me. And thanks so much for staying with me. With that, thank you. And over to you, Pooja.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much, Dee. We have questions rolling in for you already. So let me invite Charlie Shore to the floor if he is around. He had his hand raised, and you already showed us some data sets and how to go about downloading it. But his specific question was, can we download a clip section to perform analytics on R or Python? So Charlie, was your question answered, and would you want to expand on that? Are you there, Charlie?
Yeah. I understand that you can download not just countries apparently, but if you're doing like an individual ecosystem, can we do analytics like collections of vegetation, for example, for a particular section of Earth using R or Python?
The answer is yes. The first option is to download the data, and then you can analyze the data offline using Python or R on your computer. And then for workspace users, there are some customizable function there. You can create your own dynamic metrics, and you can build your own widgets. We didn't cover the training of Workspace today, but I will share more guidance talks later, and then you can see how to conduct those analysis online. I hope that answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. So we have another question. Once you register into the platform, can the person's region or country be changed? This question comes from Philippe Charrière.
Yes, definitely. Once you registered, if you click on the account icon again, you will enter your profile, and feel free to edit your profile anytime you want. The region and country is definitely editable. Thank you.
Great. We have a question from Maureen. Maureen, are you still in the house, and would you like to ask the question yourself? All right. Maureen may or may not be here, but let me pose the question to you because I think it's an important one. What is the process for countries to submit information to update data to their country profile?
Fantastic question. Thank you, Pooja. I think my first answer here is if the country wants to suggest additional data, they can submit the data to us by a link on the support page, and we'll view the data at periodically base and update the info for you. And the second option is if the data is only national based and you only want to share with a certain group of people, we suggest you use the workspace function. And I'll share the link of how to apply a workspace for your country and for your team. And you can upload your data there by yourselves. Hope that covers your question. Thank you.
That's great. I'm going to ask Hartwig if you are still around and would like to raise the question you wanted to ask. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Hartwig, are you there with us? All right. Hartwig asks, and I think this is an interesting one. So what if the area of concern is not a country specifically, but it's more of a transboundary catchment basin? How would you slice and create? Would Dee be in the best place to answer this question?
Thank you, Pooja. Yes, if it's not country, on the public platform, we have already uploaded the state level data. You can find all them in the other jurisdiction filter. And also we uploaded several cross-boundary area. And if within all that area, you didn't find the one you want, you can feel free to email us and to suggest the area we should upload to the public platform. And then also, if you just want to view the area by your own, we suggest you apply a workspace with us, and then you can upload all the shape files of your places of interest and view the data in that place specifically. Thank you.
I see that Hartwig is back, so I'm just going to quickly turn it over to him to see if that answers questions and if there's anything else that he'd like to ask around it. Hartwig?
It answered my question, in fact, because what it is really about is the shape files, and it is the question on how do you, for instance, delineate a subset of a data set and overlay data that are relevant. I was giving the example somewhat further up in the chat on water quality, water quantity, and those issues in a transboundary system. So you need to say work on the basis of a hydroshed basin shapefile or something like that. And that is what I wanted to say. Do we have such a tool as a cookie cutter to make sure we have the relevant data set available?
If I can jump in here, maybe Diane, help out a little bit. I think there's kind of two approaches here. There's the ability to kind of really, as Diane mentioned, upload a area of interest as an individual shapefile within your kind of within your private workspace, or secure workspace rather. But the other approach is to maybe explore developing your own specific widget, which might be able to select the area of interest based on your choice, your preference as well. So I think that will require a little bit more of Di's training in the upcoming events.
Yeah, and I mean, behind that is not just me as a UNEP staff. Behind that is really hardcore scientists and data experts. So yeah, that's great. Thank you very much to you both. And thanks for bringing it up, Pooja, in my absence.
That was a very interesting question and got me curious, and I'm sure the others would have liked to know. So thanks, Hartwig. Kenneth Davis, are you with us still? We saw a question coming in from you.
Hi, Pooja. Yes, I am still with you. Unfortunately, my children are also with me here. So I'm sorry, I'm going to be that guy with more of a question, but a comment. In fact, a suggestion. I was just wondering about the functionality to use adaptive projections, which Mapbox now has recently developed, because we have this really common use case of wanting to show a global map, and it's great to see that in a projection that's not a Mercator projection. And then you've got the conflict with how you do that with a web map. So more just of a question to the team, whether that would be something they would consider. I think that would help a lot of users in getting that and producing those global views. Thanks.
Would you like me to jump on this, Di? Just Kenneth, on this one, I think none of us are really none of us on this call are backend developers, but we are in constant collaboration with our backend developers, and this is a suggestion that we will absolutely pass on. I believe a lot of our base maps and things like that are developed in Mapbox, so it seems like a logical improvement that we could try and make.
Great, thank you so much both. We have another question from Jiaoying Ye, and she asks, for countries like Sao Tome and Principe that are not listed, How does one add the country to the database then? Oscar, who would like to take that on?
I actually think Saint-Tropez is actually in UN Biodiversity Lab, but if I'm wrong, apologies. But I believe this again is a case of if there is an area of interest that you cannot find in there, either as Dee indicated last time, contacting us and asking for it to be added to one of the places of interest on the public space within UN Biodiversity Lab, or working within your secure workspace and adding it as an area of interest yourself.
Great, thank you. So the next question is an interesting one, and it's something that we grapple with as well here over at UNEP, which is API based, right? So is there a UNBL API standard in place for data providers to contribute to? And can you expand more on that?
Again, this is, I think, one where I'm just going to have to hold my hands up and say, look, there's a team behind UN Biodiversity Lab, and some of those have very specific knowledge around the standards, for example, on APIs and how they're integrated into the system. Suffice to say, I think that there are standards being developed, if they aren't already developed, and we pull data in from APIs of all sorts, so whether they be Esri proprietary software or more open source software, we are developing systems that can account and pull in data from any of those different APIs.
If I can add on that, actually, take the opportunity. I think this is one of the reasons why I'm very excited about the conversation we're having, is I know that this is a network of experts who also do know the state of the art. And so we would very much welcome your suggestions, or if there's something that you can't currently do with the site and you think this is absolutely crucial, this is a use case we want to build, please do get in touch, because knowing some of these API standards and again, what isn't possible, what is needed, really will help us in the coming year to be able to prioritize. So just to add that, thank you. Pooja, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. So I'm going to pick up on this, Lauren. A little while back on our feed, Riley had asked about marine data sets. And perhaps, and you had responded that indeed we have quite a few, but if you have suggestions, please, we're all ears. Could you talk a little bit about what we do have in place and what the gaps are, so this incredible community out there can have a sense and even make suggestions?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you, Riley. That's an excellent question, and as a fellow marine scientist, but also just have a passion for the ocean, I recognize that this is an area that we all want to strengthen. At the moment, we do have a global fishing watch, for instance, on there. We have administrative boundaries. We have marine and coastal habitats represented on the site. And then we have broader data sets around, for instance, global surface water, marine pollution index. But I think ultimately, I'm aware that the marine environment is a space that perhaps doesn't have the same level of 10-meter resolution, and the change over time. So again, as we are moving forward with this system, very much wanting this to be sort of a co-designing process, I think the link was shared earlier about how to suggest data sets. I know that there's lots of advances in the marine space. I see new papers coming out each month. So please do share them with us. Let us know, because I'm sure we haven't collected all of them, but we are very eager to work closely with the data providers to facilitate that. So yes, thank you very much for flagging that as well.
Thanks, Lauren. Do we have Mauricio Nunes? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question on Esri and story mapping? Or maybe I can share the question. Mauricio asked, can maps be inserted on Esri story mapping? Who would like to take that?
I can go for it, sure. I think there's probably two approaches that I would take when it came to trying to create Esri story maps with through the UN Biodiversity Lab. The first is to think about downloading the data and working with it within your Esri environment. Should that not be an option, I think then you can start working with more sort of static images, perhaps, and using them as kind of an image as background images within your Esri story maps. I don't think that's the ideal option, and I would be hoping, if I was working with or trying to get the most out of an Esri story map, to be using sort of live data that I downloaded and uploaded into the thing. The other alternative is to try and identify where UN Biodiversity Lab is pulling the data from. So, for example, if you're looking at the WDPA, that is a ArcGIS web service, which could very well be used directly in your Esri story maps rather than having to download it from UN Biodiversity Lab. So using the live web service as well.
Thank you, Oscar. So we're going to take a last couple of questions. So I encourage colleagues to please post them in the chat, and if I could also encourage the panelists to please respond if you find any of them interesting or something that piques your interest. So here's another data question while colleagues punch in their questions on the feed. So Nathan Roberts says, I've been looking for above ground and below ground carbon data. Regarding the AGB, BGB carbon 2010 data set that was shown in the presentation, is that the same as the SPAWN S.A et al. 2020? In quotes, harmonized global maps of above and below ground biomass carbon density in the year 2010. I wonder if and how they may be different. In particular, I know the SPAWN reference is better for forests than for shrublands. It would be good to have both of those data sets. Oscar, would you like to respond to that?
It would be good to have both of those data sets. I believe that they're not the same data set as pointed out in the question. One is from 2020 and one is from 2010. I believe there's also another above and below ground carbon data set, which has been recently developed in UNEP WCMC as well, which would be an interesting avenue to explore as well. So I think the question is about kind of really comparing the uses of these data sets. And I think we don't want to necessarily be prescriptive with UN Biodiversity Lab about what data set you should be using, but hope that some of the knowledge can be imparted onto UN Biodiversity Lab users for them to be given enough information to be able to understand which data set is right for them. So in this case, linking to the paper that explains to more about these data sets and explains where their limitations are, which one's better for what. I think that's the power of UN Biodiversity Lab, rather than being prescriptive and saying you should use this layer over that layer, allowing users to sort of choose which layer they would like in their metric.
Thanks, Oscar. We really had such an interesting range of questions, and I'm sure there are so many more questions that have risen. They've certainly risen in my mind, and I think the team intends to answer some of these in a systematic fashion. So watch out for that. But I'd like to take an opportunity to do a little bit of an exercise with this group, if you will. On the chat, if I could please ask you to share what you see the potential applications of the platform UNBL for your own work. Maybe there's something that the team here is not thinking of. So it would be really interesting for the team to see that and perhaps gather some insights on how they can extend the platform offering. So we'll give you a few minutes to please share your feedback and insights with us on the chat. So thanks, Francesco. Common country common analysis, the CCA's common country analysis, that's a strong one. applications for academic papers and risk assessments, supporting countries in their in updating their NBAs, SAPs and monitoring them as well. Incredible tool for ecological restoration, cross-cutting issues, overlapping biodiversity layers with data layers important for work. That's a favorite of mine, cross-cutting data and the insights they bring. Enhancing environmental monitoring in the local government setting, indigenous peoples empowerment, fresh data for country analysis and NEA data collection, helping countries identify areas where artisanal and small-scale mining is taking place in sensitive ecosystems, monitoring fauna impact assessment. This list is incredible and I'm sure will act as a fantastic source of inspiration for the team here. Rapid response to coral bleaching. Do we have time for a couple more? Using this tool as an analysis for wildlife, to detect wildlife crime patterns. I'd like to be able to assess how illegal poaching of native wildlife relates to land cover use such as forest loss. Opportunity to involve a lot of different audiences as well, from education to rural population. And last one, urban forest restoration linked to the SD indicators. So lots of interesting ideas and thought starters, some of which may already be part of the platform. Well, thank you so much for these rich insights. This is really valuable as the team continues to design the platform offering and support your work, really. So with this, I think what we've come to almost the close of the session. There are a lot of documents which also cover this information. They are going to be made available in all 5 UNBL languages. Marjorie, our colleague, is going to drop the English links into the chat, but happy to provide the language links on request as well. There are several upcoming events. First off, there is a side event at UNEA 5.2, which you can see on your screen. It'll be a dynamic networking session, and you'll have the ability to really engage with the data providers firsthand and explore the various data applications. Meet diverse users that are utilizing the platform today to support their national priorities. And the registration link will also be dropped into the chat, so look out for that. Next slide, please. So we are going to be offering today's session in English again, but we're going to support it in languages as well. And we have a self-paced micro course. A lot of the questions were on the platform itself, but on learning for nature, you can find the micro course, and it covers a lot of content that we ran through in our webinar today, with lots of interesting information on different types of satellites and sensors and profiles of national use cases and case studies. So look out for that registration link for the micro course. I'm certainly going to look out for that one. And if you could move to, yeah, that's it. We're also partnering with NASA RSET to offer an advanced training on the platform that will really sort of build on what we've covered today and explore the many features available through the UNBL secure workspaces that Dee mentioned. So if you are interested, drop us your email in the chat together with NASA RSET, so we know that is what you're specifically interested in, and we'll let you know about the registration. And with that, I'd really like to thank all the panelists today and our guests for a really exciting and interesting session. Let's stay in touch, and please don't hesitate to reach out to the UNBL team if you have any other questions. And have a great morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.